Yes, it's that time again, and it's time for Hadders to potato around through history in this new series, The Trips of Ships. This series will be spread sporadically amongst other videos and will cover fairly in-depth histories of a chosen ship. I will tell you about its birth, some facts and figures about its construction, and then I'll take you through their career and their fate. The video today will cover the Imperial Japanese Navy's, or the IJN's, Nagato. This is named after the province of Nagato in southwestern Japan, as you can see from the maps I'm showing on the screen provided. In the game it is a tier 7, it sits in the tier 7 Japanese battleship tree, and it finishes in its fully upgraded form after the 1930s refit. Its construction, the Nagato was ordered in May 1916, so during the First World War. It was laid down on the 28th of August 1917, and it wasn't launched until after the war on the 19th of November 1919. Once the ship is launched, it then needs all its fittings and sort of top parts mounted and so on and so forth, so it wasn't actually completed until November 1920, and it was commissioned shortly thereafter. Its notable sister ship, she was the lead class of 2 battleships, and she had one sister being the IJN Mutsu, which is also in the game at tier 6 in its 1920s layout. So effectively what they've done is put the sister ship of Nagato in the game and left it unupgraded in order to leave it at tier 6. Its characteristics in its final configuration. It was one of the first battleships designed in Japan and the first to be mounted with 16-inch guns in the whole world. This is because the British Royal Navy and the British Armoury used to help the Japanese design their ships, as well as building some of their ships in the UK, a great example of this being the pre-dreadnought battleship, the Mikasa. The British designers used to design ships based on Japanese specifications and then probably loosely based them on a lot of the British battleships. So, the Nagato weight, it displaced just under 47,000 metric tons at full load, so this is its characteristics when it was fully upgraded. Her size, she was 225 metres long, 35 metres wide, and had a draft, so that's the depth of the ship below the waterline, of 9.5 metres. Her speed during trials was 25 knots, and her power plants produced 82,300 shaft horsepower. Her guns, she carried 410mm or 16.1 inch by 45 caliber guns. These were mounted in 4 superfiring turrets, 2 fore and 2 aft. Each turret carried 2 guns each for a total of 8. In its final configuration it could fire a round up to just shy of 38 kilometers, and it had a firing rate of 2 rounds per minute. Her secondary armament was 20 140mm or 5.5 inch by 50 caliber guns mounted in casemates around the upper hull. Believe it or not, the IJN Nagato was actually mounted with torpedoes, and she carried 8 launchers, 4 each side, 2 above the waterline and 2 below the waterline. Her armour protection, she had 305mm or 12 inches thick at the waterline of armour. She had 69mm or 2.7 inches of deck armour. She had 75mm or 3 inches of lower deck armour. Her turret armour was 460mm on the face or 18.1 inches, 280mm or 11 inches of side armour, and she had 250mm or 9.8 inches of turret roof armour. She had 305mm or 12 inches of armour over the turret barbettes, and she had torpedo bulges installed in her major refit. 32.6% of her displacement was armour protection. This compared with 33% for the HMS Hood and 36% for the SMS Hindenburg. Both ships were built at a similar time, though I would argue Hood's armour was spread poorly around the ship, too much in some places and not enough in others, like the deck armour. The Nagato actually carried aircraft. She could carry 2 to 3 biplanes or float planes, which were originally launched off the number 2 turret at the front of the ship. Later these were launched off a catapult that was installed between the mainmast and turret 3. She carried a crew of 1,734 men in 1944, so that was her largest complement. Some interesting features. Early on, she had a terrible funnel arrangement that choked out crewmen on the bridge as well as towards the rear of the ship. The famous pagoda mast was installed between 1934 and 1936. Before then, she just had a regular sort of Japanese/American style mast. The Imperial seal of the Emperor of Japan, also known as the Imperial chrysanthemum emblem, is on the bow of the ship, and all capital ships in Japan carried this proudly on their bow, usually in gold. Moving on to notable operations. IJN Nagato's first operation was the Great Kanto Earthquake of 1923. This year a huge earthquake struck the Kanto Plain in central eastern Japan. It measured a 7.9 on the Richter scale and lasted several minutes, devastating Tokyo, Yokohama, Chiba, Kanagawa, Shizuoka, and caused widespread destruction across the whole region. It is estimated to have caused around 142,000 deaths, with over 105,000 being confirmed. As shown on the colourful map, close to the epicenter it is theorised that the ground was moving up to 140 centimeters per second. The Nagato and her sister Mutsu were involved in relief operations carrying supplies from Kyushu to the stricken region. The next operation that Nagato was involved in was sinking the IJN Satsuma. Along with her sister Mutsu, Nagato fired upon and sank the obsolete battleship in September 1924 for gunnery practice. The obsolete ship was sunk in accordance with the new Washington Naval Treaty, which was designed to reduce capital ships of all signatories in order to stop another arms race that, for example, had pretty much, they reckon, caused the First World War. This treaty reduced the IJN tonnage limit of all their capital ships to 315,000 tons, and all nations to a weight limit on each of these ships to 35,000 tons. So the heaviest battleship allowed in this treaty, apart from existing ships, was 35,000 tons. The largest gun caliber allowed on any ship was 410mm or 16 inches, which the Nagato already had. Needless to say that the Japanese weren't happy with this treaty when they wanted to expand in the late 30s. In 1936, they left the treaty and broke all of the rules of it shortly thereafter with ships like the Yamato. In the interwar years of the 1920s and 30s, the Nagato spent her time between duties in reserve, as a gunnery training ship, as a member of the 1st Battleship Division for the 1st Fleet, and notably as the flagship for the combined Imperial Fleet. Throughout the interwar years and during World War II, the Nagato underwent minor refits in 1922 and 1924 to try and fix her funnel and the exhaust issue, in 1926 in which the above-water torpedoes were removed for more anti-aircraft armament, in 1930 the bow was adjusted to try and reduce spray, in 1932 the AA was upgraded and reconfigured, in 1932 to 33 the rangefinders in turrets 2 and 3 were adjusted as seen in the game, so you got the big fat binocular things hanging off the top of the two turrets. In 1937 the AA fire control director system was upgraded. In 1939 the AA was improved further. In 1943 the air detection radar was improved. In 1944 there were AA improvements and improvements to the surface radar. There was a major refitting conducted in 1934 to 36 where the Nagato was up-armoured on its belt, its torpedo bulges, its main deck, its citadel armour and the turret barbettes. Its gun turrets were replaced with turrets from the unfinished Tosa class battleships, and its stern was extended to improve the speed and performance, as well as the pagoda style mast being installed. So these upgrades were massive, and it took 2 years to upgrade the ship, with 11,000 tons of upgrades being added. In February 1936, the Nagato fought against a coup d'etat shortly after the major refit was finished. She was deployed into Tokyo Bay as a show of force and to land some of its sailors as troops in support of the government. During the Sino-Japanese War, she landed 1,749 men of the 11th Infantry Division in Shanghai, and her float planes bombed the city. During World War II, the Nagato was the flagship of the combined fleet under Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, who gave the order for his carrier strike force of the IJN to attack Pearl Harbor. This was done from the IJN Nagato on the 2nd of December 1941. The attack itself was launched on December the 7th, with radio silence the whole time in between. Japan entered the war against the USA and on the side of Nazi Germany the next day. During the Battle of Midway in June 1942, the Nagato was assigned to the First Fleet. During the battle, the carrier force was lost, with Japan losing all 4 of its major carriers in the engagement. Admiral Yamamoto tried to salvage the situation by using the First Fleet to lure the Americans into range of planes that were launched from Wake Island and the First Fleet itself. The Americans instead withdrew and the Nagato saw no action. In 1943, Nagato stayed in Japanese waters training. Throughout the rest of 1943 and early 1944, the First Fleet, including Nagato, tried to intercept and locate the US fleet, who remained elusive and no major action to engage was taken. In mid-1944, Nagato took a minor role in the Battle of the Philippine Sea, escorting carriers Junyo, Hiyo and Ryujo. During the battle, the Nagato was engaged by US aircraft and was strafed with no damage suffered. Hiyo was sunk and Nagato had to pick up the survivors. During the Battle of Leyte Gulf in October 1944, Nagato was made part of the main fleet that was tasked with attacking the US fleet landing at Leyte. A diversionary force would draw the main US fleet away from Leyte, while the IJN fleet of battleships, heavy cruisers and escorts would sneak in and smash the landing forces. During the battle, Nagato was bombed and had several secondary guns knocked out. During this battle, Nagato on the morning of the 25th of October fired her first shots in anger at the escort carriers of Taffy 3. She also had to dodge torpedoes fired by the USS Heermann, a Fletcher-class destroyer, which forced her and the Yamato to drop out of formation. The Nagato was hit again by dive bombers, but not seriously. The Japanese fleet was forced to withdraw and came under intense air attack repeatedly, though no damage was sustained. Unfortunately for the IJN Nagato, she was left high and dry, and on the 25th of November 1944 she returned to Yokosuka for repairs. Due to lack of fuel and materials, she could not be replenished and was turned into a floating anti-aircraft battery. In a fleeting hope, she was reassigned to the 1st Battleship Division in January of 1945, but this was disbanded a month later due to lack of fuel and resources. The Japanese had lost their strategic foothold and were now concentrating purely on the defence of the Japanese mainland. In June of 1945, around half of her AA guns and all of her secondary armament was moved to shore. Her crew was reduced to less than 1,000 men, and on the 18th of July 1945, while in heavy camouflage, the Nagato was bombed as part of Admiral Halsey's campaign to destroy all of the IJN capital ships. One bomb struck the bridge and killed several men, including the second in command. Another hit the deck between the mainmast and turret 3, penetrating and exploding below deck. The barbette, however, was not penetrated and the turret was fine. The Japanese left the damage unrepaired and flooded the ballast tanks in an effort to make it appear that the ship had been sunk. The Nagato was captured after the Japanese surrender on the 15th of August 1945. She was secured by sailors of the USS Iowa and the USS Horace A. Bass, who took command of the ship. The fate of the IJN Nagato was not a pretty one, and it was selected as one of the capital ships to take part in Operation Crossroads at Bikini Atoll. A fun fact about Bikini Atoll: Bikini Atoll is the reason that bikinis are known as bikinis, because it was a major event in history and the designer wanted to basically sell more swimwear. Originally there were 3 tests of nuclear weapons planned for Operation Crossroads, but only 2 happened. There was the Able test above water as an airburst and the Bake test below water amongst the fleet. During the Able test, which was detonated on the 1st of July 1946, Nagato was 1,500 metres away from ground zero. She was only lightly damaged and a test crew boarded her and even managed to start up one of her boilers. During the Baker test, the detonation of which was on the 25th of July, Nagato was just 700 metres away, and the shockwave from the blast carried through the water, ripped into her hull, and would have caused severe damage. Unfortunately, due to dangerous levels of radioactivity on the ship, that she couldn't be assessed for repairs, and she eventually rolled over and sank during the night of the 29th and 30th of July. Where is she now? The Nagato lays upside down in Bikini Atoll at a depth of just 33.5 meters. She is a tourist attraction for scuba divers that want to explore the relatively clear, shallow waters. And there we have it, the life and death of one of Japan's greatest battleships, the IJN Nagato. I hope you guys enjoyed, I hope you learned something. I'm going to try and do these once in a while, maybe every month or so. They take a hell of a long time to make. I didn't actually realise how long it was going to take me to do this. I have actually been doing this since I put up the last video. So it's taken me sort of 3 days of research, grabbing pictures, desperately trying to find out as much as I can and find decent movie clips. Please let me know what you thought in the comments. Please, if you think I got anything wrong, also let me know, but be constructive, be nice, because it is quite hectic to try and find some of this stuff out. I really do hope everyone enjoyed, and hopefully I will see you all soon.